I am very delighted to introduce our alumni panelists joining us today. Today's panel of alumni experts have in different ways are working or are pursuing building an online or digital business, and they will be providing their personal insight and useful resources on how you can do the same, regardless of where you may be in that journey. So the panel joining us today is Dilraj Atwal. He specializes in marketing and brand strategy, so he's a consultant for various private and public sector clients. He is an alumni from the BA Honours Business Studies and Marketing course and graduated in 2010. Also joining us today is Ethel Tambudzai, hopefully I pronounced that right, and she is the founder and CEO of Tambu Group. And she graduated from BA Honours Development Studies and International Relations in 2018. And we are joined also by Paris Fatnami, CEO and co-founder of Honey Twigs, and he is an alumni graduating from an MA Marketing Communications in 2010. So I will just ask our panel to talk about what they've been up to since university up till now. But before I do that, just to give you an overview of the structure of the event. So firstly, I will introduce the panel. I will then share questions regarding their journey and what they're working on, their respective businesses. That will be followed by a Q&A, but the questions I ask will cover these three areas. So one, why an online business? So really exploring the opportunity starting an online or digital business offers. And also questions exploring their journey from idea to business. So what key steps are they taking or did they take towards profitability? We will then also cover summarize key takeaways for you and also recommended resources. So firstly, over to the panel. Could each of you please give me a brief overview of your journeys from studying at Westminster until now, and which experiences specifically had an impact on inspiring you to be doing what you're doing now? I'll start with Paris. You're on mute, Paris.
Sorry. Yep. Hopefully you can hear me now. No, so thank you firstly for having us, and it's a pleasure to share our experiences with everyone on this event. So I graduated in 2009, 2010. I initially ventured into media business, worked in media planning, then went on to work in an education conglomerate called QS. I was there for about 10 years, led the marketing division there. Earlier this year, I decided to focus on my entrepreneurial project, which I've been running in parallel for about 3.5 years. It's in the food space, so I've been in the service line for over a decade, wanted to move into a product, and so far we're currently present in about 5 countries, with an overall turnover of nearly $500,000. And given the pandemic, we've moved heavily onto the digital world, and I'm happy to share some thoughts about that. In my previous roles, I led the digital transformation for the marketing division at QS, and also ran an agency in the past as well. So glad to be here and happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thank you, Paris. Over to you, Ethel. What have you been up to since Westminster, and what inspired you whilst you were there?
Cool. Thank you for having me. I hope you can all hear me okay, which is great. I guess I graduated about 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago now, and I had so many ideas for different businesses that I wanted to get involved in, or I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. And I had a whole host of mentors who were like, okay, well, why don't you like essentially take a career gap year? Because I'd worked with startups during my time at Westminster. I'd worked within the student union. Everyone had all these amazing jobs, and I was like, what do I do? I want to travel the world and get paid for it. And everyone was like, that's what everyone wants to do. So you got to figure out how you do that. So I started introducing investments with a mentor, and that was just like, wow, okay, incredible. In renewable energy and infrastructure. So I would shadow him and assist him in doing all of that. And then from there, I set up a company called Generation Africa, which was all about connecting the African diaspora around the world. And so that was going to be a digital platform mostly because, I mean, we weren't going to be meeting each other all the time. And from there, I set up Sonar. So I put that to the side for a while, and I set up Sonar, which was a platform connecting Black communities around the world with a co-founder. And that was an app-based community, and we were at Google for Startups. So that was a whole digital platform, and we completely underestimated what it means to have an app built, to run it, manage it, and also have a digital magazine and have all these members from around the world. So I'm happy to talk about that, but I think that was a really important thing for me to get involved in. And I've recently stepped down from that, and I'm going back to Generation Africa on a parallel. But at the moment, what I'm doing full time is consulting in business strategy, business development, and corporate governance, whilst I also complete my master's in corporate governance and business ethics at the moment. So yeah, I guess have lots to say about the digital world in the different forms, and also, yeah, just really excited to get involved.
Thank you, Ethel. That sounds like a very busy 2 years. Over to you, Diraj.
Hi, can you see and hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, bear with.
Can't
Can
see
you?
you
You
yet.
should now be able to see me as well. Perfect, cool. So hi, I'm Dil, and I graduated as Paris did in 2010 as well, from Westminster. So kind of a decade out of uni now. And so as soon as I kind of graduated, I went on to kind of have a career in marketing. So firstly at Unilever, and I was there for just over 6 years, nearly 7 years. And then I went on to Samsung as a brand manager and a marketing manager. And then after my time at Samsung, I spent time working with a founder who founded Joe Media, which is a digital publishing organization. And as kind of after being a director there, I then founded kind of my own consultancy. So I saw that as I was working through all the different organizations that I'd worked at, or the 3 organizations that I'd worked at, people were asking for consultant work. So in parallel, I was doing that. And then after doing that for 2 years, I kind of took the plunge, and this time last year, just before actually, I took the plunge and became a consultant full time. So my journey is slightly different, not selling a specific product, selling myself, selling my service. But it's, yeah, it's quite interesting. And in terms of digital marketing, I suppose the insight that I'd hopefully be able to provide some of you guys is more about working with founders who have set up their own online businesses, and looking at kind of how to, once the business has been set up, how to kind of turbocharge it and take it to the next level. Cool, that was it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Diraj. That's great. So we are going to kind of dive deeper into what you are all working on now. So the first question is, please describe your businesses. So that is whether you're working as a consultant, or what specific product or services you're offering to your customers. Could you describe that for us? So to answer the question again, what is it that you are offering to your customers, and who are your customers as well? Let's start with Ethel this time.
Cool. So I guess my consulting at the moment looks very different based on who I'm working with. But I'm working with members clubs. I'm working with other consultancies. I'm working with small charities, like one man, one woman business teams to, I don't know, 50 people business teams. And what essentially I'm going through with them is helping them to problem solve is the base, I think, of what my business does. With business strategy, it's kind of setting where would they like to be in like 3 years, or where do they want to be after COVID, or if COVID continues for the next 5 years, what do they want their business to look like? And then kind of helping them to break that down, but also help break that down across their different teams, or if it's a one-person team, helping them understand the next steps for them doing that. And also helping them set up their governance structures. So if they've got an advisory board, if they have trustees, helping them understand what that looks like, what that means by law. So I guess I'm selling myself as a problem solver for a manner of problems for different businesses and charities. Yeah, so I'm kind of, I guess, the helpful aunt or helpful sister who comes in when they're like, what do we do? And I go, well, what do we want to achieve? And then I kind of walk through that process with different businesses.
Okay, and for yourself, Diraj?
Yeah, so right now, I'd say that I've got 3 core clients at the moment, doing 3 very different things. So one of them is working on interior design, and they essentially are a sustainable kitchen organization that look at reusing kitchens and looking at reusing kitchens in the best way. I think the best way I'd describe them is they're probably the auto trader of the kitchens world. So, you know, if you have a product, it sounds a little bit crazy when you reflect on it, and in retrospect, it's kind of like, you know, your kitchen in your home, sorry, I'm going into details, but your kitchen in your home essentially is worth anything between, you know, 5 and, you know, 15, 20,000 pounds, depending on what type of kitchen you've got. And, you know, the first thing that people think about when they do home renovation is to kind of out with the old and in with the new, when actually you can actually sell the old and you can sell it for a profit. And you can put that money towards, you know, something new. But at the same time, also, what you're doing is you're effectively saving 6 tons of carbon waste by not creating a whole new kitchen that doesn't need to be created, and also by sending an old kitchen to landfill. But so that's one challenge, which is all about sustainability, all about normalizing such a new concept, and helping the business grow from a small to medium-sized enterprise to a definitely a national enterprise, and then, you know, hopefully far and beyond after that as well. So there's that, and that's kind of looking at the whole business process, everything from kind of marketing to the actual business strategy itself. So that's a massive challenge. And then another thing that I'm working on at the moment is with the local authorities. So there's a local authority, there's a few local authorities that I've partnered with near to where I am in the Midlands, and one in particular is looking at how to commercialise their assets. So obviously we know that the challenges that, you know, local authorities are facing right now, especially with during the pandemic, actually, but before that as well, you know, for quite a few years now, local authorities have been looking at ways to bring in more money and to commercialise some of their assets essentially, and to get kind of market value for them, just so that they can give back more to the community and kind of, you know, reinvest in the local communities as well. So that's a really interesting challenge. So kind of working on kind of looking at their leisure facilities to kind of more staple kind of things that they offer the local community as well. And that's an interesting one from a, you know, a kind of an online digital consulting perspective, but because, you know, as you'd imagine with a lot of local authorities, there's a lot of red tape, and with that comes a lot of processes, and a lot of those processes are then naturally quite you know, non-digital. So it's actually making, you know, kind of transferring the paper-based stuff, and, you know, believe it or not, it is, some of it is quite still a lot paper-based, and you have to transfer that over to the digital world. And it sounds easy, but it's not, because, you know, when you have to work through the process of doing that, it does take quite a while. But, you know, at the same time, it's a different type of challenge. It's very exciting in its own way, and you learn kind of a different perspective as well. And also they do very innovative things as well within local authorities that, you know, you wouldn't have first thought. And then finally, another client that I'm working with as well is looking after music talent. So developing music talent in my local area. I'm based in Nottingham, in the Midlands, and so looking at how to take local raw music talent, people who kind of singer-songwriters, create their own music essentially, play the instrument to actually kind of create the music rather than kind of manufactured or anyway, and looking how to kind of raise their profile, get them kind of get them out there essentially, via not only kind of the radio means, but kind of other digital social means as well. So that's a really interesting project, actually nurturing local talent. So yeah, 3 very, very different kind of prospects in terms of types of client. But yeah, hopefully if there are any specific questions, I'll be able to help in terms of how to set up a digital world or business.
Thank you, Diraj. And Paris.
So firstly, I mean, listening to you both, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing in life, but no, some great stuff. So I'm playing 3 different hats, and the first one is the core of what I do, which is so the startup that I run called Honey Twigs. Our focus is on helping people build healthier lifestyles by changing small things in everyday eating habits, and our focus at the moment is on honey. So it's single serves of pure honey that you can use anytime, anywhere. So that's the product, and we're available both online and offline, working in retail as well as food services. So working with the likes of Starbucks, other cafes and hotels, and then again on the retail within in-person and online trade. The second thing that I do is I'm one of the trustees at QS World Merit, which is a charity that aims to help and foster global citizens by recognizing and rewarding impact on reaching sustainable development goals. And then lastly, because I've been passionate about the education industry, I have recently joined the board of a new startup that's helping universities and business schools explore regionalized opportunities using market expertise and technology within the upcoming student markets globally. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you all. So my next question is, so what inspired you to get to where you are now? If you can reflect on a specific moment or an event or something that you came across that inspired you to pursue what you're all building now, what was it? Starting with Paris.
I think that's that moment of inspiration changes ever so often, because every time you do something more, you evolve that vision that you've built. But one of those or 2 very notable ones in my journey, one has been so when it comes to food, a lot of us eat in busy lifestyles. We forget to take care of ourselves, especially with the food that we eat. And I went through something similar about 6 years back in the thick of things with my job, and that's where I felt that what if someone was making it easier for me to be healthier, because it's that little things that you eat or do every day, be it exercise or be it food, that make notable differences over time. So there was a time in 2014 when I was traveling for work, and at that point I literally was traveling for nearly 6 months at a go. And in one of those periods, when I was with a friend, we said, what if eating healthier was easier? So that was one. And the second thing, which is very closely connected to the charity that I support, has been, so I also launched and supported a solar lighting initiative supporting people that had no access to electricity back in 2010. And there was a kid there who basically who had a different impression of what basic essentials are. So fundamentally for them, light was a privilege. And that, to me, always kept me grounded to what we have and what we believe we deserve and what other people deserve in the world. So those were 2 very notable moments that I experienced since I graduated, if I was to say, that made a difference in what career choices and direction I've moved in.
And for yourself, Diraj, what inspired you? Kind of what were your motivations to get you to work on what you're working on now?
I would say it's a really weird one, you know, and like it's not a single moment that's really inspired me to get to where I am now. I suppose it's a build up of you know, various different things, but I don't know. I mean, I've always had a passion and an interest in advertising and in marketing in general. So I always knew, like you said at the top of the conversation, you know, the course that I did was business marketing. So I always knew that that is what I wanted to do. And actually, interestingly enough, after I graduated, for 2 years, actually, I didn't, you know, work in the marketing field. You know, I worked as a project manager, I worked in R&D, I assisted, I supported marketing functions, and I always kind of the itch within me was I don't want to be supporting that function, I want to be doing that. And you know, after you know, there was a period within that couple of years where I just kind of thought, sod it, you know, like I'm quite happy in the job that I'm in, so why don't I just continue as it is? But then you kind of hit these moments where you're working and you don't really enjoy it, and you know, so and when you don't enjoy it, it starts to affect you, kind of, you know, not necessarily your performance in the job, because you know you got to maintain a certain level of consistency, I suppose, and but I think outside of work, you know, you kind of you realize that this is not what you want to do, and then you go away and you know you start looking at other areas. So you know, I suppose the motivation which made me want to do it was the fact that I couldn't do what I wanted to do for a couple of years, which made me work hard to make sure that, you know, I got the role that I wanted. Yes, it took me a bit of time, but you know, certain things do take time. And then after that, I've been pretty consistent on the path. So it's always been kind of a marketing brand strategy type role, and that's, you know, it's the interest, it's the passion for what I do that keeps me motivated. And that keeps me wanting to do what I'm doing, basically. So yeah, I think if you're thinking about a single moment in time, it's probably the 2 years between graduating and getting the job that I wanted. That's what really kind of gave me the motivation to know, actually that's what I want to do, not kind of what I was doing back then.
Thank you. And Ethel, what was your spark that led you to where you are now?
Cool, thank you. I think it was so the year before I graduated, I was working at the university in the Students' Union as a sabbatical officer. And it was a really interesting time because lots of change was going on. And we had lots of different consultants coming in for different things. And in the startup that I was working in, they had lots of consultants who were coming in, and I'd be thinking, well, if we all sat down long enough, we would have come up with some of those answers. But I guess, you know, it's great that there's these people coming in. And I was a trustee at the time for a charity Race on the Agenda in London. They were like, we need to pay for a consultant. And I was like, everyone just seems to pay for consultants when they have problems, like, and they need someone to solve it, but don't necessarily want to be involved. So I started asking all these consultants, so how did you get to where they were? To where they were? Or, yeah. And a lot of them just said, are there problems, a set of problems that you can see that you would be able to solve? And how are your relationship skills with different people? Do you understand? Would you be able to do the work if somebody asked you to do something? And if you're not sure how to do it, why don't you offer your friends or some businesses and just offer them some pro bono sessions to see and learn? So that's kind of what I did. I just learned, and then I started, as people started asking me, I'd be like, yeah, well, I offer that as a service. Would you, if you're happy to pay, here's my, you know, my little invoice. Or so I guess that's kind of how I started. I just started telling friends. And my mom started telling all her friends, and all the aunties started telling their aunties. Yeah, and then I think I just kept going, and then I started thinking about how do I improve my skills. So I started doing lots of courses on project management, on business strategy, on just trying to always be better and be able to offer a better service, whatever I was doing. So it was seeing that everyone always has or even from starting my business, I could see why people pay for consultants, because you only have mind space to do so much, and you want to know that somebody else is doing stuff and that they're going to do it well, and you don't have to think about it. So I just started thinking, well, what's the best way that I can help the people around me? And I guess that's kind of what triggered Tambo Group and kept it going.
Thank you, Ethel. So next question. So this is kind of more of a more technical side of things. So a lot of the time, people tend to generalize all businesses, especially within the digital realm. Could each of you kind of outline what you see as the key differences in the challenges, especially the different routes to market that online businesses or digital businesses or services face in comparison to kind of your traditional business model? I'll start with you, Ethel.
For sure. I think for me, as a service-based business, offering a service to different businesses, and because I'm not massively digital, you might look at my website and be like, I know, I'm sorry, it's getting fixed. But I think the biggest challenge that service-based businesses might face is people not knowing who's the person behind the brand. And if people don't know you, they're usually questioning your reputation. Your reputation, but they're also questioning, can you actually do it? What experience do you have? For product-based businesses, it could be quality. Like, is the quality of your product as you say it is? And what do other people say about it? And and some people might be thinking, have you bought those reviews from people you know, so that everything looks really good and dandy? So I guess being a digital facing business can be really difficult if you don't have the personal relationships, or also can't portray who you are as a person, and if you don't have those personal relationships referring you to new networks.
And for yourself, Paris?
So I think when it comes to a digital business, and I think Ethel pointed that out as well. There's a huge difference between a service line business and a product line business. For me, having run and been involved with both, I think the one critical element is who's the user. Many a times businesses get that wrong, or think that everyone is their potential user. So focusing on that target audience to know who is going to be on the other side of the spectrum, and who are you servicing, be it a product or a service. That is the critical thing, and most times early stage businesses make that mistake because they feel, well, at the end of the day, everyone is the consumer because everyone could buy this, right? So honing in on that specific audience, whoever that may be, and deciding that in advance is one thing I'd highly recommend. That's a mistake I probably made quite early in my career too.
Diraj, and yourself?
Yeah, so I think in terms of online versus offline, just generally, I think, Ethel made a few kind of very relevant comments on Paris as well. But, I'd say, the fact that there's so much more online, isn't there? So your competition instantly is times by 1,000, 1 million, or however many kind of other people are offering the same service as you. And then it's like, how do you stand out? And how do you cut through the clutter, really? With only being, just using my example, not being as established as kind of, the bigger consultancies out there, and so that's a big thing. But also you can use that to your advantage. You can make sure that actually target clients that that you're gonna do well for, etc. And that's where online kind of comes into its own, really. The whole targeting element, the whole kind of being able to pick out 1 out of 1 million. Whereas when you're in store, or when you're kind of offline, it is a little bit more difficult, because if I was to literally physically set up shop in some on some high street or on some town centre, advertising consultancy service, I'm very reliant on people just walking past that store physically. So which isn't good business, right? Your overheads would be astonishing. So Yeah, I think the big thing, there are more positives to be online than there aren't. Sorry. So that's the big thing. The big thing is about knowing your audience, knowing who you're going to target, and then being able to kind of pick that audience out. So yeah, the two challenges are very different, and as Ethel said, the fact that the guys that are on and offline, the kind of the major established players, yes, of course they've got it better, because they've got two sources of revenue essentially. But it doesn't mean there's a lot of brands that you guys can all think of that have established themselves online and then quite nicely transferred into the offline realm as well. So and your overheads are less as well. So I think there's more positives of being online than there are.
Yeah, if I can, just one more quick comment. I mean, there are definitely more benefits to be online, but you've got to be also conscious that from an offline perspective, a consumer can always touch and feel when it's a product in particular. You need to create that experience for them online, and that's where the ability to showcase the benefits and articulate them well is extremely important, especially from a product perspective, and service is a whole different realm of opportunity and way to look at that. But this is a disadvantage online, so you got to think about how do you counter that with something that can make the person experience your product even though they can't touch and feel it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well, Paris. And just to kind of build on that as well, it's so important to be kind of like omni-channel or think omni-channel when you are online as well. So the fact that if you A/B test kind of a product out there, and one has just the image and another has an image and a video of the product as well, more than likely the one with the image and the video is more likely to sell. Again, it depends on kind of cost thresholds as well. But then on top of that, are you optimized from an SEO perspective as well, PPC, etc. So there's so many kind of factors that you need to consider when selling online. It's not just a factor of, or it's not just a case of I've got a website, or I'm kind of I'm on social media and that's just about it. All these things kind of work with each other and are very much interlinked as well. And ultimately, if you are just a purely online business, the thing that I always say to my clients is, if you just are purely online, that is your shop front. Your website is your shop front. So you've got to be directing everybody to that shop front. Just as if I don't know, if some kind of store was selling some product, they'll always direct you to the store, like go in store, buy it now, etc., etc., etc. And you've got to always link back your content to your website essentially, or wherever the product's being sold, be it your own website, or be it kind of some kind of kind of concession-led page or whatever. So yeah, it's a very good point that Paris mentioned.
Very briefly, Ethel, would you like to add to that?
I was going to say it was it's a really big point actually that Paris mentioned on knowing your user, and I can see some of the questions about how do you figure that out. But I think it's really understanding who your user is and not thinking about every kind of user, but the first user that you're going to target is really important. Otherwise, you end up I don't know the word, almost like with a sieve and the sea, trying to catch every single person who runs through, rather than going for the specific group of people who would say yes to your product to start with, and then thinking about building that base going forward.
Yeah, totally. It's such a good point. And I see some of the questions. One of the questions on the kind of Q&A on the side is somebody who's looking to who is kind of self-teaching Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics, all that. That is so important to use that data to understand who your user is. A lot of the time you'd have an inkling, and when you launch a product, of who you think the user is, and it will surprise you. It will surprise you who actually purchases the product. Yes, that target audience that you thought you were kind of going after, yes, they kind of percentage of them buy it, but actually there's this whole new audience that's very interested in your product, and it's so important to delve into the analytics. And it's so in answer to that person's question, yes, self-teaching yourself these kind of tools is very important. and it'll enable you to kind of further market your product and understand kind of new audiences that are out there. And also, I think there was another question of what's PPC. Yes, it is pay-per-click.
Okay, thank you. We'll get an opportunity to answer all the questions in the Q&A in the chat. Just to wrap up this segment of questions, so how has, very briefly, COVID-19 affected your business or the way you do business? Has it been good? Have there been opportunities that have come out of it, or challenges? I'll start with you, Paris, please.
So I think what COVID did is taught us how to do business differently, especially from the brick and mortar retail perspective, moving completely completely off that and going online. And so our business traditionally was 60% or 65% nearly was food services, which is hotels, cafes, airlines, and in a jiffy all of that was gone. So we had to literally pivot that entire business to online and to the retail side to sustain and manage through our cost base and at least make sure we break even from a business perspective. So it gave us an opportunity, and today when food service does open up, we know that our growth rate would be much higher because we've already built a new platform and generated an X amount of revenue through that as well. So it gave us an opportunity. We focused on our e-commerce sales, be it Amazon, be it local, aggregators in the 5 countries that we're in, as well as our own website. So that definitely brought us to the forelight.
Ethel?
Sure. So quickly in response to your business, Paris, if only you shipped to the UK, I would be #1 customer right now ordering. I just tried and it was like, sorry, you're not.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. I will message you.
Thank you. I can't wait. I can't wait. I guess for me with COVID, business has boomed actually, which is not something that I necessarily expected or imagined. But I guess a lot of businesses were heavily reliant on their physical, like you've just mentioned, Paris, like making the pivot from sectors they were used to working with, if that's retail, hospitality, and then all of a sudden that being closed and not knowing how long it was going to be closed for. A lot of businesses were asking, well, how do we make money now? Or where else can we go and make money? Or how do I build a whole digital platform? And they would ask me, and I go, well, that's not me, but I can help you think about the steps and refer you to the different people like yourself, Dale, who focus on marketing and who could create the shop front branding, imaging. But a lot of people didn't know where to go next. So I think a lot of my business really boomed, but it also taught me a more compassionate way of doing business, because I think COVID has been a massive challenge for a lot of people. And I'd been trained that you just turn up and business is business. But COVID, you'd see people's children running behind them, or like the microwave pinging, or whatever it was that was going on, because everyone was working from home and people being more willing to talk about what was going on. So I think from the personal aspect, that was one way. From a business perspective, I've also come up with different like payment plans for different businesses, and which is something I wouldn't have thought about before, and I've just gone, well, if you can't pay, sorry. But now, like, being more flexible and thinking about how I do business with people and how I build the relationships has changed with COVID, and I'd say for the better.
Okay. And yourself, Dale?
So yeah, I mean, slightly different for me because before COVID, I was working from home anyway, and I'd go out to see clients probably a couple of times a week. But the rest of the time, yes, I'd be working from where I am now. So so not much has changed from that perspective. I think one thing that I would say from a positive perspective is that people are embracing kind of, virtual working a lot more. So, even though I was working from home this time last year and I'm working from home now, the amount of video calls that I'm doing now versus then has gone up by 100%. So it's like if you're not using Zoom now, or if you're not having a video call with somebody, something's going wrong. So it has, to use that phrase that has been overused this year, it has become the new normal. So I think that's the biggest change, and I think it's a change for the better. If you look at the future, it's actually encouraging people not to increase their overheads by having office spaces unnecessarily. It's actually empowering people to in the future, hopefully when life returns back to normal, that people can also work remote as well as work from the office and have a more agile and flexible kind of work-life balance. So from that's probably been the biggest change. The biggest change has been people embracing technology to actually do work. And it is actually more efficient to actually work like that, instead of wasting an hour or two traveling into work and then an hour or two coming back. You're effectively using that time now doing kind of personal things or even working. So effectively you are becoming more efficient for whatever organization you're working for, or your own organization if you set up your own business.
Okay, and Paris.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question for me?
So the question was, how has COVID-19
It was how has COVID-19 changed your business or the way you do business?
Right. Yeah, I think I answered that to start the round. But no, most definitely, advertising digitally became a core source of action for us as well. So there are some questions which I'm sure we'll take up later, but we migrated a lot of our marketing dollars into online marketing, and literally that was the timing couldn't have come at a better time. So yeah, in principle, we had to pivot quickly, but we did that, and today I'm confident that as we move forward, it opens up additional revenue opportunities for us.
Great. So moving on to the next segment of questions. Sorry, I got lost in the internet ether there, but I'm back. Kind of what I'd like you all to do is, can you recall getting your first customer? So what was the journey like to your first paying customer? What were the key steps that you
Right, I'm going to assume that I knew the question, so I'll jump in. In terms of my first customer, it was somebody who I had partnered with in the past. So it was just kind of it was a call out of the blue. Actually, I was in between. I just about to leave one job and just about to start a new job. And I literally had a week in between, and I wanted to give myself a holiday because obviously, when you leave one job to the other, you want to, have a bit of time before you start the new one. And as I was starting to kind of like get into holiday mode, I suppose, somebody picks up the phone saying, "Dale, I really like, the work that you do from a brand strategy perspective, and I need some support in my own business." And we need to look at new ways of kind of making the business more streamlined, kind of finding more opportunities for future revenue pipelines, etc. And I was like, yeah, fine. I wasn't really expecting the call, so it was a kind of a feeling of oh God, like do I have to? But then also another feeling of jubilation of like, yeah, bloody hell, this is great, right? I'm gonna, this is an opportunity. I didn't really see it as an opportunity to become, if I can get my words out, a consultant in the future. That happened a couple of years later when I just thought, well, actually, this is a good opportunity, isn't it? And it's something that I enjoy. Again, it's going back to that. You've got to feel passionate about something to do it. And sometimes that passion takes time. Sometimes you feel it instantly. So yeah, I think but then after that, it's kind of slightly different. When you kind of build your kind of custom base, that's really exciting. So the first feeling is probably different to the other two guys, where they probably felt like, oh, it's so exciting. It's something that was built up to. I think I'm getting that feeling now. So you just kind of now that you're in it, and then you look for your next one and your next one and your next one. That's the journey of kind of, it feels really exciting of you put so many hours into it, and then finally when you've received that phone call or you receive that email saying we would love to progress, and that's kind of a feeling that is kind of uncomparable really, when you're kind of in comparison to doing a 9 to 5.
Great. And that was the right answer. Sorry, I dropped out halfway through. How about you, Paris? Kind of, what was the journey to your first customer, and what were the steps that you took to get your first paying customer?
So since the time we launched, it took us about 6 months to get the first paying customer. We set up our own manufacturing arm. So for us, getting the product right was a big part of the future story. We went to farmers markets, we went to events where we made people try the product. So for us, it was an evolution of the product first. So we were a product first company, and we believe today we still are. We want to make sure that we're taking the right thing to the consumer, not a half-baked solution. So it took us 6 months. We went through 3 iterations of the product to get to the final one, which was then solving the problems. But before, so taking one step back, actually, what we did was we knew we wanted to operate in the food space. We knew we wanted to work on something that was helping people helping people live healthier lifestyles. We went to the consumers and asked them, what is the problem with honey that you face today? We surveyed about 3,500 people. From that, we understood the 3 most common challenges. Spent a good 3 months building that product, took it to market for trial, spent 3 months testing and trialing that. And by the end of the 6-month period, we had something that consumers were accepting as a product. And that's when we put a price to it and started going to market with it. And just following that, once we put our retail product live for people to use, we got our first B2B customer, the food service customer, in one of the biggest cafes in India today. So I think getting the first customer and getting a product right to me go hand in hand.
Ethel?
Yes, totally agree with that, Paris. And I think for me, I remember my first customer came after I'd done the 3 pro bono consultancies that I'd mentioned. And I think for me, doing those pro bono cases for me was 3 case studies that I could use to talk about the work that I could do, as a form of confidence boosting for myself, but also as a reputation builder. And then it was one of those it was a charity that I did a free consulting with, essentially, who said, oh, well, we know loads of customers, or we know different people who are looking for a consultant. Would you like us to refer you? And I was like, acting calm, yes, that would be wonderful, because it would be nice to get paid. And without really asking me too many questions, they were like, well, we've seen the work you did with them, we'd like you to come on board. So it was a referral from one of my pro bono case studies.
Amazing. Great. So next question is, and I've not heard any of you mention this, and it could be you probably did when I disappeared in the internet ether, but a lot of students often ask kind of, do you need a business plan to start a business? And if you do, what makes a good business plan? So kind of looking back when you were starting, or even now, do you have a business plan, and what is in that business plan? Go for it, Ethel.
Okay, for sure. I think I didn't have a business plan, but I now do have a business plan, and it might not be the most detailed document that I have, but I recommend it for whoever is thinking of a business, for having an idea of where do your paying customers come from. What is the core mission of your business? Like, what direction do you want to be moving in? And what goal are you setting for yourself? Because you could say, I've set up a business and have no goals and just kind of float through, but not really have a direction of what you're aiming towards. Are you aiming towards a better product? What does that look like? How many clients do you want to have if that's consultancy? Yeah, like, where do you want to be? Or how many people do you want to know about the work you're doing? Or do you want it to be referral based? Do you have a process or a system for that? Do you have people helping you? I think it's good to have some kind of a business plan document to help you figure out who is doing the journey with you, what are you offering, and what are you good at offering? What are people going to pay you? And how much do you actually need to make sure that the business breaks even and then can even start to make a profit? And yes, I shared my business idea with other people.
Thank you, Ethel. And Dill?
Yeah. So so for me, I didn't actually have a kind of, you know, your classic business studies undergraduate business plan that you do in business strategy or whatever other subject that you're doing. So it's not your classic kind of, you know, I don't know, 2,500 word and aiming to get, you know, 70% plus for it or anything like that. So it's not as structured as that. But what I would say is that, you know, whenever I hear that word, have you got a business plan or anything like that, it does remind me of university so much. It does remind me of coursework. But, you know, one thing that I'd say is that coursework, it puts you into a good position in the future. So, you know, unconsciously, when you're, you know, you're doing your own business, or, you know, you're kind of working for somebody or whatever, you know, that thought process comes into your mind, but you don't know it's because, you know, you did business studies 10 years ago at university. It's just because, you know, you're naturally trained now to think like that. So it's actually really good from that perspective. You know, you should put 110% into kind of doing those kind of, you know, business case studies, etc., because it does help in the future. In terms of did I do it for myself? Yes, I did it to an extent similar to what Ethel did, really, mainly drawing up a pipeline of, okay, where's my business going to come from? And, you know, kind of a revenue pipeline of, okay, is it going to be referral? Is it going to be me putting myself out there physically on some kind of social platform or on a website or whatever and trying to drive people to that? But ultimately, you know, for me, it was a pen and paper. You know, it was my notepad, and just writing in my notepad in terms of, you know, what I want the business to be, or what I want to be to kind of to others, what service that I kind of want to offer to others, and, you know, where I want to be in 12 months time, 24 months time, and then even further out if you know, if you've kind of got it that clear in your mind where you're going to be in 5 years time. So yeah, that to the extent of a business plan for me wasn't a typed up thing on Microsoft Word. It was my pen and paper.
Okay, Paris?
So slightly different to the other two, I did put time into a business plan before I started, because at the stage, well, in my earlier businesses, probably I was more drawing myself on instinct. But at the start of every business, I had a pen and paper to do the numbers. Does it make commercial sense? So you may want to do a business plan at some point. If you're just starting off early in your career, I get it. You know, it's not the first and most exciting thing that you want to do. But draw up your numbers. They need to add up. They need to make commercial sense for you to do it. So in my earlier businesses, I probably didn't. But in the last 5 years, anything I've touched or invested in, I've thoroughly gone through a business plan process.
Yeah, 100%. And just to kind of build on what Paris has just said, it's just, you know, I think there's a distinct difference as well. You've got a physical product, and when you're offering a service, I think the two are slightly different. But when you have got a physical product and you're investing in kind of, you know, manufacturing materials, etc., you've got to have a business plan. I think, you know, if that's what a lot of people are kind of tuning in and listening for, you know, if you're looking to invest kind of significant amounts in creating a product, or kind of creating your own kind of platform or website or whatever, and you've got money kind of gone into it, and it's not just a service or yourself that you're offering to people, and then 100% you need a business plan.
And so quick, Sheila.
Sorry, Eva, you had one very quick thing to say. Yeah.
A very quick thing to say. Using the 5 W's is a great way of starting your business plan. 5 W's for you and what your team might look like, and the 5 W's for who might be using your business. What, why, when, how. Like, that's my really quick point.
No, that's great. Thank you. Hopefully people were able to write that down. So the next question I want to ask is around funding. So Paris mentioned there something about investing in something. Have 3 of you sought funding, so external funding? Are you interested in acquiring funding at some point soon? And if you are, or for those who are going to require funding to kind of get their business up and running, what advice would you give them? So Paris.
So have I raised funding? Yes, I have. I have 2 angel investors on board at the moment. I have an advisory board who are not monetary investors, but time investors as such. Am I looking for raising rounds? I'm in the process of one at the moment. So definitely in that process. My advice to people would be, and I think the 2 points of from the previous bit and now are sort of connected for me. Before you go out and pitch your product, one product or service, have proof of concept. So have your consumers tell you what they like, they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. Second, spend enough time to understand where scale comes from, because an investor is looking for scale. Most of the investors, especially when you reach a point when you're talking to VCs or PEs, they're looking for an exit in 3 to 5 years. So you got to think about, are you ready for providing that scale to them? And the last bit I'd say is, know where are you going to use that money? Because the amount of times that people feel that they need money but don't know where it will go, I mean, that is one of the first filters investors put to suss out that they don't want to invest in somebody or not.
Okay, Ethel?
I agree with most of what Paris said. And I think also really understand your numbers. So, like, do you have, I guess, a budget? Do you have a budget for your business before you go out? And do you understand? I'm basically echoing what Paris said. Do you know where the money's going to go? And I think also ask yourself, what are you willing to give up when you go for funding? Because people aren't just going to give you money to give you money. They're looking to also take ownership of a percentage of your business. So how much are you ready to give up? Do you understand what that means? And I think really look at that process. We got funding we had angel investors for Sona, who really wanted us to, and also some investors, there's different types of investors. Some people will come in, put in the money into your business and will wait for their exit. Some people want to come in, but also have an input in where your business is going. So some of those investors wanted us to be really focused on the African market, but we weren't necessarily ready for that. So that was a really tough conversation to have, having got them on board. But I think it's really good to know, where do you want the business to go, and then communicate that and make sure you're going in the same direction as the people who want to give you money.
Yeah, I think beyond what the 2 guys have said, like, I don't think I have anything additional to say in terms of, me personally, I've not had to go out to get investment. It's just not the nature of what I do. But I totally echo what the guys have said, and obviously they've been through it, and they've got clear examples of that. I think, one of the biggest things that stood out there was, just listening to it, was the fact that, if you are going to go out and get money, and then, you've got to know where you're going to spend it. I mean, it would be ludicrous if you just don't. So, yeah.
The one other thing I would add to that is, understand and know the philosophy that your investor and you have, because it's very often that if they don't agree with the way you're trying to build the business, depending on what level of equity are you able to shell out when you bring them in, for most entrepreneurs, the passion drives the outcome, and so ensure that they understand your passion and believe in the same outcome that you do, because it's not just about the money in the longer run.
Okay, thank you all. So one last kind of summarizing question before we go into the Q&As that have been shared in the chat. I've seen so many questions. Kind of what would you, could you each of you narrow down kind of 3 key points of practical advice or resources that stand out to you that you would like the audience to take away with them today? So let's start with Dill.
Right, 3 pieces of practical advice. They put me on the spot now. So I would say, I think what's really important is if you are looking to set up your own business, and then you've got to be really sharp and really clear in terms of what is it that you are offering to somebody. Is it, if it's a service, and then okay, where do you really specialize? What's your what is it? What's the advantage that you could bring to whichever client that you're going after? And most importantly, ask yourself the question of how can I add value, or how am I going to add value? How am I going to communicate that? Because we all sit there and think I'm the best at X, Y, and Z, but the hardest thing to kind of do is to communicate that to somebody and actually convince them that they actually need that product or that service. So I think ask yourself those 2 questions before emailing anybody to offer your services or to offer a product. I think that would be kind of the most important takeaway that I would say. And in terms of resources, I keep seeing that question pop up on the side. The resources, I would say, from understanding your audience's perspective, you start with the basics, because if you don't know the basics, then you're never going to be able to grapple with the kind of other bigger data management forms that are out there. So if you are selling a product, and if you are selling it online, which is what this seminar is all about, or what this session is all about, and then you get a handle on your Google Analytics, get a handle on your Facebook Analytics, get a handle on your Instagram Analytics as well. Like every single platform that you're on, you should be gathering data from it. If it's the website, and then that's your Google Analytics, or if you're using Squarespace, and then that's Squarespace. But essentially, piece of advice that I can give on analytics is use all the free platforms to its maximum, and then once you've maximized on those free platforms, and then move on to investing in other platforms. Because if you're investing straight away, or if you've got some consultant coming up to you saying you need to invest X, Y, and Z, an X amount into platform whatever, and straight away you should be kind of some alarm bells should be ringing in your head in terms of, right, we haven't even grappled with the kind of the foundations yet, the basics. I don't even know who my audience, because I haven't even looked at Google Analytics. So yeah, do the basics first, and then if your business is successful and growing, and you need more information, you need more insights, which we always do, and then yes, invest further. But that would be my kind of key bit of advice.
Great, thank you, Dill. Paris?
So in addition to what Dill said, obviously, use the analytics for all, so Google, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I would say look up, so while creating an online business, the consumer journey is a big part of that story. So there is WordPress, there's Shopify, there's HubSpot, and HubSpot has a free academy as well. So you could definitely use that in terms of understanding the consumer journey better. And I'll also say that look up, so there's this one line that I always use before I start a business. It's called an HMW statement. So how might we statement. And there are, the minute you Google it, you'll find 10 resources for that. But as you're starting that, start with the how might we. So understand what problem are you solving and who you're solving it for. And then obviously there are the other resources that I mentioned that you can use to build on the consumer journey and other digital assets for the business.
Great. And Ethel?
Thanks, Paris. Yeah. Community Canvas, I've just put in a link into the chat. It was a great free resource that I was introduced to. And it kind of goes through mapping out what your business would look like or what you're imagining it to look like. And they've got a guidebook, which is 61 pages long. And they've got so many different worksheets on building out of like what the structure of a business or an organization would look like that you'd want to set up. And they go through what branding looks like. What does your community? So that's one part. I'd say that's a great place to start, and it matches into the business plan conversation we were having earlier. But also on a personal level and also the professional level, finding a community to do business in. So, for example, having your own personal support system is so important. Setting up a business, running a business, leading a business can all be very taxing in terms of it's you who's driving everything, but you can also get lonely from experience, and most people in your life might not understand what you're doing. By getting yourself around people who are trying to do similar things and people who are building, it can be completely different things to what you're building, but the fact that you all can relate to each other's journey of starting solo or starting with a business partner is really important, and even just being able to get feedback from people, but also just great for mental health to have other people who you can talk to about what you're building, who kind of understand the process you're on, but also find yourself maybe a friend or amongst your friends, find somebody who's happy to talk through and go through that journey with you. He's going to be checking in, who you'll be checking in on too. Yeah, because I think building in community is far better than building in isolation.
Okay, thank you all of you. That was great those were great resources, advice, and tips. So what we're going to do now is move on to the questions that have been shared in the chat. So the first question that was asked that I want to share with you all is, when is the right time to register an online business? Is it before starting to earn income, or should you wait until afterwards? And then the second part of that question is, how do you register an online business? I'll start with you, Ethel.
Yes, cool. I would personally say after you've tested out what the business looks like. So it's controversial. If you're creating a product, if you're creating a service that is very unique and you've not seen it anywhere else in the world, it's probably good to secure that name. But you can do that through your domain. And on Companies House, registering the name is not the most important thing. And it's important to know that once you've registered your company, the clock starts ticking for when you have to submit your company returns, which is your annual tax accounts, and things like that. So I would say give yourself time to figure out what the business would look like and earn revenue, and see that if this is something that you'd like to commit to first, because once you've set up or registered your company, to close it down, you still need to submit accounts to show that you haven't submitted money, which is all you haven't paid money, which is money, right? So just think about it. I think give yourself time to go through it. And once you register, once you decide you want to register on Companies House, you can use any name to register the business. Well, maybe not any name, make it relevant to what the business is about. But then you can always use trading as to use the name of the business that you would like to have if you couldn't secure that. Governance 101.
And what about you, Dil?
Yeah,
What would
governance
you
101 right there from Ethel. Brilliant. Yeah, I wouldn't have anything different to say to that, to be honest. You know, the key point there is as soon as you register, like Ethel said, the clock starts ticking in terms of, you know, having to submit accounts, etc. And the thing is, you know, if nothing happens of that business, and then effectively you're wasting your own time from setting it up, and then to closing it down, and then to potentially having to, you know, if you have spent, you know, a little bit on it, having to, if you can't do the accounts yourself for some reason, having to get an accountant involved, and it's just, yeah, it turns into nonsense, to be honest. So, you know, if you know what you're doing and you're kind of on that journey, and then and then register, etc. But always, you know, again, a point that Ethel made earlier as well, always get advice from people that are in a similar situation as well. You know, build a community, and you know, if you're unsure, if it's somebody who works in the professional services like accounting, etc., you know, get their point of view. You know, make a friend, build your network in that area. I'd say. So yeah, just basically echoing what Ethel just said.
To Paris, the same question, but I want to add another question that was shared directly to you, in which was, is your company legally established as an entity, and I'm guessing is in the UK or in India? Because I guess you are cross-border. So how does the registration of the company work in that case? And then the follow-up to that is, once you've registered a company which is trading internationally, what are the implications from your experience? So in addition to when is the right time to register your business?
Yeah. So whether you should register your business or not before revenue, I'd say it really depends on your product or service, depending on what you're working on. So hypothetically, if you're working on an AI or machine learning platform or algorithm, you definitely want to protect the IP for that. So then revenue is not the point, the launch is, because there are companies that don't make revenue for 2 or 3 years, but they have an IP to protect. So I would say think about what that business is, understand the business, commit to it. Once you're committing to it, you're putting resources and time against it. You should register it if it's that kind of business. If it's a service offering, if it's a consultancy, I think there's a minimum in the UK, at least there's a minimum revenue threshold. So pilot and test till that point, but then be compliant as you move forward. Coming to my business in particular, the production of honey twigs happens in India today. We are aiming to set up plants in other countries, but at the moment, the production and export happens from one location. So honey twigs as such is an Indian entity that is trading with multiple distributors across the world. And obviously I work through a distribution model. I haven't set up companies in every country, but I have distributors who have rights, who have MOUs with, that have the right to trade. I have also at the same time, however, trademarked my brand in every country that I trade in. So that's an important asset. Even though you're not an entity in that country, you can trademark your brand in that country. So no one can launch the same product with the same brand name with you trading alongside. So trademark your brand if you have a product. But I think I've covered the other points around services and if you should go through the process of registering the name in the UK in particular.
Okay, the next question for all of you is, how do you deal with competition between other online or digital businesses that may be offering similar products or services to what you offer? Let's start with Jill.
I think, especially when you look at the service kind of industry and providing some kind of professional service, I think a lot of it is down to when you're kind of competing against another kind of service offering. A lot of it sometimes it depends on the client, but sometimes it's down to budget. Other times, I would say it's down to relationships and building that rapport and that relationship and understanding, and that kind of comes from understanding the brief from the client. So the person that, for me, in terms of from a competition perspective, it's always been, how well has somebody interpreted the brief from the client, and because ultimately when it's between 1, 2, 3 people, when there's a short list, they're happy with everything else that's on paper. They're happy with price, they're happy with scope, etc. And then it comes down to, okay, how well have they understood the brief? How well have they understood the business? And how well will our relationship kind of develop? And is there a rapport there? I think to go in kind of quite cold in pitching yourself or kind of your product or whatever it is kind of never advised, especially the kind of industry that we work in, like marketing, etc. You've got to be personable. You've got to show that you understand and show empathy, etc. I think Paras alluded to that earlier. When you go into pitches and when you go into presentations, you show more of yourself than just your product. So yeah, that would be my take on it.
Thank you, Dil. Ethel?
Sure. Please, could you repeat that question again? You can't hear
So
me?
the question was, how do you deal with competition between other online businesses that may be offering similar products or services to your own?
Cool. Great question. I would say so firstly, the relationship I have with previous clients, but also with the audience of people who may be engaging with the content that I send out through the newsletter. So mostly relationships and the relationships that I have with the people that I'm doing business with. But secondly, I think it's also hello? I've left the chat.
I can hear and see still.
Oh, sorry, that was so weird. I just said you've left. Okay, I'm back. So I think the first thing I said was, so the relationship that I have. But secondly, also thinking about my why, like why I do business is really important. There's so many different people who are doing business to make money, to solve people's problems. But my why and communicating that with my audience, but also the people with the audience, but also with every person that I do work with, for them to leave knowing that I focus the time that I did on their work. Because a lot of my work comes through referrals, even though I'm digitally present and have a shopfront window. A lot of my work and the pipeline of work that I do have is through referrals and introductions and building a network of people who are looking for my services. But I've also made sure to work with my competition, which I know isn't always popular. For example, where I have work where I think another consultant might be better suited, I often refer that work to them.
Okay, thank you, Ethel. Paris?
So I think when it comes to especially differentiating yourself, the one important thing is being able to communicate your USPs clearly. Why you? And that may sometimes when business is similar, there may not be such a vast difference between that, but the ability to articulate that better than somebody is always in your control, or the belief that you can keep you one step forward. The second bit I would say is understand who your competitor is when you're saying there's a similar product or service that you're competing against. So what that helps you do is apart from articulating where your USP is able to showcase content more effectively. So in today's digital world, content is what is driving influence. Be it influencers that you work with, which is third-party content created for you, or content that you're creating and putting out in the market. It's critical that you know that every content that you put out there is creating a a reference point to what your product is or what your service is. Also ORM is critical. So online relationship management, and by that I don't mean people-to-people skills, but even on the dark web, there's a lot of people posting about different things, especially when it's a product, saying here's feedback about the product, right? Being able to respond to that promptly and being able to be involved with the consumer, I think also helps you differentiate that, because people everyone wants to relate to the brand, and if they can, that gives you an edge against competition many a time. So for us, that's been a big part of our ethos. That for example, online, a lot of people talk about quality of product, right? And so for us to be transparent, to say if you buy a product and if you have a question, you can ask a test report for that product, and we will provide that to you. And we've posted many a times in forums, openly about a test report, which most people will be conscious about. So knowing how far you want to stretch yourself and how transparent you're able to be, I think makes a big difference in the digital world as well when doing business with products.
Okay, thank you all. Just keeping an eye on time, we probably have just enough time for just one last question. So if you could just very briefly answer this question, and then we'll wrap up the event, is how have you dealt with difficulties in your journey so far? And kind of what made you push forward when you've dealt with those difficulties? So very brief answers to wrap up. Starting with Dil, please.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is when dealing with any challenges that you face, I think Ethel mentioned something really strong there, which is understand why you're doing it, understand what your kind of motivating factors are in life and in your career, and then you've always got to go back to that as your anchor, essentially, and then that will get you through whatever period you're going through.
Ethel?
Yeah, thank you for that, Dil. I would say, yeah, I always center myself around my why, but also I try and learn from why is something difficult. Is it difficult, or am I experiencing this difficulty because of how I'm feeling and where my capacity is, or the challenges that I'm having personally, or am I having those difficulties purely in a professional sense? And what is it that's what makes it difficult? How can I learn from it? But also, how can I solve that problem, or what would solve that problem? And how do I get to that thing that helps make it less difficult? And sometimes for me, it's taking a break. And sometimes it's bringing in advisors. Sometimes it's bringing in other consultants and just asking people, hey, I'm working on the solution. Do you have an idea, or what would you do if you were given this thing? I think difficulties will always come, but it's also about how we respond to them and learning how to respond to different things. We don't always know when a difficulty comes up, but it's about thinking, where can we go for advice, or where can we go to learn, and where do I find the answers, I guess. And then making sure, once again, that I have that support network, that I'm bouncing my ideas into, my questions, and I've got my trusted circle of people that I'm going to share when things are getting difficult and ask for emotional support, or asking for support when I don't know what to do, or I don't understand why things aren't working out.
Okay, thank you, Ethel. And Paris?
So very briefly, I'd say, I turned to 4 Ps at that point, and some of them have been articulated already. So I start with patience, process, people, plan. And I think that sort of takes you through any challenges that you face as a part of the business. And each of those points that I mentioned have their own. You can use them in your own ways to move forward.
Great, thank you all. That's pretty much all we have time for. Thank you for sticking with us, even the technical issues that we faced. Thank you so much, Paris, Dill, and Ethel, for your insights and giving us your time this evening. It's been a great discussion, really kind of meaty, in-depth discussion, loads of tips and resources shared. For those that have joined us, thank you as well.